Welcome to Break the Silence, Build the Future, a podcast dedicated to amplifying the voices of survivors and advocates while shedding light on the pervasive issue of gender based violence. Join us on a journey where survivors find strength in sharing their stories and experts offer profound insight into this critical societal issue. Welcome to another episode of Break the Silence, Build the Future. In our previous episode, we spoke about the challenges women face and why is it women for most part are not reporting domestic violence or violence against them or difficult relationship they're in. And that is a situation that is layered. This woman is invested in this relationship emotionally, psychologically, financially. Also, would she be able to raise the children by herself if she gets out of this relationship? Is she going to make this person more angry than they were before? Is she going to be able to get the support she needs from the community, from family, from law enforcement? So all those questions has to be answered in this woman's mind before she can take steps to terminate the relationship. Also, when we talk about the violence against women and girls, we're talking about a large group that are diverse and varied at so many levels. And as we know, certain group of women struggle with the situation more than other group of women, and that could be the woman's class, women's socioeconomic standing, her status in the country, her language, her cultural differences, her religion, ethnicity, racial differences, all those are labels. And we know racialized women are more likely to experience and not report violence. So you would ask yourself the question, why? One of the things that you could look at is the relationship between racialized women, women from minority group, minority background, and the law enforcement, and the trust between the two groups. If that trust doesn't exist, it's harder for women to go and report, because this is a woman that is in a vulnerable position at the time because she's facing violence in her own relationship, and all the doubts of whether people would believe her or not, lack of support in the community, that's added to what is the relationship like between racialized women and law enforcement that adds or contributes to this woman's reluctance to report or seek help. Today, I'm being joined by Asha Umar. She is a mother of two, the founder of WST Foundation and Wellness. She's a survivor of no-knock police raid and that trauma and the lack of her ability to find support in the community, that support that met her particular needs. She took that and she established this foundation. And we're going to explore how a woman in the same experience Asha had would not really seek help from law enforcement because there is no trust. Thank you for joining us, Asha, today. I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me, for giving me the opportunity to speak about my experiences in relation to building trust in law enforcement.
To start off, share with us your story or the negative experience that you had with law enforcement. That if you are in a position or were in a position to seek help from the law enforcement, that will make you sit back and take notice and examine and say, do I really want to go there? Can you tell us what that experience, what that story of that experience is like?
So we start out with the incident that took place on January 27th of 2023. Myself and my two small children were involved in no-knock entry. There was an investigation being conducted on my home where SWAT entered the home early in the evening. It was a Friday night. I had just picked up my kids around 6 p.m. It was a very cold day, I remember. We got home closer to maybe 6:45, just a little bit shy of 7 p.m. I made some supper. I went downstairs. I did a load of laundry, put a few clothes in the dryer. Out of nowhere, I heard the biggest, just most alarming, chaotic noise of my front door coming down. I remember, my small children just screaming because there was a lot of chaos and noise. I was met with several sergeants that had the helmets, they had semi-automatic rifles. There was a lot of them, and the doorway was very small and tiny. The words that were being used to get down, I froze and I was petrified because I've been seeing a lot of incidences just on social media, on the news. I'm thinking like, maybe they have the wrong unit, and I'm trying to talk back and work something out with them, but it was just a lot of shouting. And after that, I came to realize that they were looking for my children's father. So he had called me earlier that Friday and asked if he could come by. He was dropping a load off here in Toronto. And I said, sure. And I said that I would return with the kids. So he would be able to have, visitations and come see them. And so all of these things just transpired within that day. And I thought, okay, he's apprehended, he's moved from the premises, they've got the person that they're looking for. Maybe now we can have a conversation now that it's just I and the children. And that, unfortunately, that was not the case with us. We were still being told to get down, and guns were still drawn on us. I couldn't move. I wasn't able to get my cell phone. And the thing that broke me the most was that my son, well, he couldn't move. He was very scared and shaken up and just pleading for his life. He was actually pleading, please do not shoot me. Do not shoot my mom. She's a good person. Please don't shoot my dad. And then when I try to go comfort them, I'm told that I cannot comfort them. So that was really traumatizing. I wasn't covered properly, and I wasn't given the time to get jackets and shoes for my children. There's all these very intimidating military with all of these rivals. So my kids had a hard time. I said, am I under arrest? Where's the search warrant? And one of the officers lunged forward at me, grabbed me by my wrist, and pulled me off like the last 3 steps of stairs. I got injured on my right side of my leg. And then when my son fell on top of me, he kind of picked him up from the back and shoved him outside the door. And it was pretty chaotic. I felt very, uncomfortable, humiliated, very cold, because now we're laid out in the hallway for everyone to see, and the exit doors blowing in wind, and just very cold. And then after that, I started hyperventilating. I felt tingly. I felt like my heart rate was dropping. I asked if they can call the ambulance. I needed to see the ambulance. I was very much under shock. I asked to see if there was an officer that was a woman that I can perhaps speak to. And she didn't show up until later on, which was unfortunate. Just as quickly as they came after they did their search, they left my home. And then from there, I had no way of driving myself to the hospital. I was very shaken up. So thank God my neighbor assisted me in that.
At one point in your story there, you mentioned a female officer, and I want to take you back there. Obviously, you are a Muslim woman, and when you are in your house and your door is closed, you're not covered the way you are now, because you are dressed to be outside. So in that case, if the police came in without knocking and broke the door down, and I'm assuming that if they had a search warrant and all that, it's possible that they knew who you were and how you were dressed, had an idea of who lived in the house. Was there any sensitivity offered to you to be able to cover or to dress or to do what you need to do once the person they were looking for was removed out of the house, and whatever danger they assumed was there was removed? Did you feel like the officers there were sensitive to your religious rights and cultural rights? Do you think they were sensitive to that?
The best way that I can answer that is the SWAT in general do not have enough training and sufficient training when it comes to encountering everyday civilians like myself. They're mostly trained in combat and high-risk situations. They have that military presence to them. Some cases they use gas bombs, so you're covered in smoke, and that lets me know that not enough information is being done before going into these units, and I find that to be a liability.
Thank you for sharing that. You had experienced this, unfortunately, and I'm really sorry to hear that, especially for your young children to experience that traumatic situation. So once that happened and the event of no knock situation passed and you ended up at a hospital for your injuries, were you able to find agencies that could help you answer the questions you had of what happened? I'm sure you had questions of what happened and why did it have to be that way, be able to support you in dealing with the traumatic situation you and your children had experienced, access or be directed or be pointed toward community agencies that work with the police that could help you cope with the trauma you'd experienced and answer some of the questions I'm sure you had.
When I went to the hospital and I reported my injuries, the doctor at the time that saw me called up 23 Division and said that, hey, we have an individual here. She wants to file a complaint. By the time those two officers came, I was very highly medicated. And I remember I could barely move. And I remember like me just sticking out my hand to receive that pamphlet, which is the police complaint form that they were giving me. And I remember just looking over to my neighbor that drove me to the hospital and just kind of giving her a look like I'm unable to speak. I don't really recall what was exchanged there. I was also met with Child Protective Services. So I go to a hospital for my injuries, and the doctor that saw me also got Child Protective Services involved. That didn't give me a lot of time to even deal with my healing and to even look for resources, because for the first 7 days, I was dealing with healing, like recovering from the bruises that I sustained, along with attending to my small children who were heavily, heavily traumatized due to this incident. It completely changed the way that they perceived information, their learning in school, their night routine for how long they can sleep, for going outside. There was an incident where someone was asking me a question and he just happened to be a Caucasian male that looked like one of the officers, and my daughter started screaming, caught me off guard. It's like I did nothing wrong in this situation. I'm a good mother. The police was negligent to my children. Then it creates doubts because, we know that as racialized women, we don't have a good relationship and trust with Child Protective Services. There's been many cases where things were done against children and families that were not correct. They were not right. Navigating through those challenges, it really creates a lack of safety. It creates an emotional imbalance. You're all over the place. Your thoughts are running wild with you. You're not getting enough sleep. In this case, you're told to tune in to the reports that the police will be sharing. So then you get another impact from that once you realize what the charges are or the allegations are. So it's more in depth of what they think took place. So then that also impacts you and all the questions that your children have. So to answer your question, there wasn't enough time for me to be met with resources. But when I did go seek out for help, I was looking for advocacy. I wanted someone that understood the law, and I was being given the wrong information. I was told to go to legal aid. When I spoke to lawyers, I was also met with not how are you or how you're feeling or what did you feel was done against you. It was more like, what's my status? Where do I live? Our PO box. And then from there, they read social housing. And then it comes down to, well, that's Toronto Housing's job to repair broken things. But my door was left not secured for closer to a week. So I had no door pretty much, and I have nowhere to go. And I'm a woman with two small children living in the neighborhood that I do. And then it becomes, well, you shouldn't live there, which is beyond me. You jeopardized my safety for myself and my children. You left us out in the cold with no door to repair or secure. You're not sleeping. You're waking up for every little noise that you hear because you know that your door doesn't properly close. So it was quite intimidating and very traumatizing ordeal. It was definitely a crisis. And I decided that, I was going to start WST because no advocacy, no community that was like, okay, we'll help you look for lawyers. You have to deal with repairing, you have to deal with healing, and now you're left to advocate for yourself. The only thing that I received was offers for counseling and therapy. Even with that, based on my socioeconomic status, it led me to going on a waiting list.
So, after you had experienced this intersectionality of being a Black woman and Muslim woman and a single mother, and in your socioeconomic status, including where you fall in the income earning category and the community in which you live in, what is the likelihood for you to say, oh, this is going on, I need to go get help, and I'm going to call this law enforcement?
Once again, we're very much reluctant in that aspect because it goes back to a lot of the things that we see happening on a daily basis in our environment. And in many cases, when you are a racialized individual and a minority individual, most of the times you're not going to feel that you're going to be heard. You're not going to feel that you have those services provided for you. We see things every single day, whether it be somebody getting arrested or there is the SWAT at your neighbors or somebody lost their child, or in domestic violence cases is through the roof. For the past 5 years, it's just been increasing to the point it's almost an epidemic. So I feel that a lot of the times what we perceive and see in these situations hinder us from reporting the things we see because it would be most likely used against you. And then you see so many people that don't get the help that they deserve. So it kind of makes you feel like what's going to be different. And sometimes in these cases, it can be very dismissive, or you're not believed, not taken seriously. And sometimes you can even go and ask for help and be told you're being difficult. A lot of the labels and the stigmas and the stereotypes that come with that, the angry Black woman, these are all things that are attached to us and prevent us from seek the help that it is that we so badly need.
So that you mentioned, and I'm glad you got us there, the idea that domestic violence or violence against women and girls, in particular community, meaning the community in where you live, other women that look like you, that are Black women, Muslim women from immigrant background, newly immigrant for the last 30 years, where do you think she would have to go for help? And how likely is it for her to seek that?
And once again, minorities, marginalized, immigrants, newcomers. It's very difficult to receive those services. For one, there might be language barriers, cultural barriers, just having a hard time navigating the different challenges that come with living in a new country. Integrating into that community and settling could be some of those challenges. Languages. In some cases, when you do report, some of the shelters are packed. Sometimes you're told to have a friend that you can stay with, so you're like couch hopping. And then to do that sometimes with small children is difficult. Sometimes it can take 3 months, 2 months to get to that shelter. And then once you're in that shelter, there's a lot of rules and regulations that you have to abide by. Sometimes that could be a lot to deal with too. And sometimes they might turn you away because they consider you to be a high earner. I remember in one case, we had a nurse practitioner. I think it was either a practitioner or RN nurse. She passed away now, God rest her soul. She had 2 small boys. And I remember she went into a shelter facility and she was complaining that the shelter had turned her away due to her earnings. And they felt that, hey, there's no point of you being here. You could go and rent a place. You can go move somewhere else. She actually ended up going back to that situation and that partner. And unfortunately, she's not here with us today. I had a situation where I reported something. And when the officers came to my house, the way that they were speaking, their body language, are you sure this happened? Asking me questions like that, dismissive, I'm being difficult. Those stereotypes that come with being a racialized woman, the looks, the whole thing made me shut down, and it made me not want to reach out again. It's really difficult navigating through those challenges. And 9 out of 10 times, people just go back to their situation.
I'm sorry to hear those stories, but that's interesting, showing how when you have all these intersectionalities, there's a lot of things working against you in the first steps of getting out. And we know leaving a violent relationship is not the easiest thing to do. And when you take those steps to leave, then if you don't trust the law enforcement, if you don't think you're being listened to and taken seriously, if you don't feel like you have places to turn to, and if even community or families or your loved ones might tell you, oh, don't worry about it, just be patient with him, be patient with him, then women might feel stuck. So the question is, how do you think education and awareness campaign might play a role in changing women's perception of the police so it's easier for them to seek help, and the police's side perception of understanding to be sensitive to cultural differences, diversities? How do you think education and awareness campaign can play a role in bridging the gap between the two sides?
I think that we need people to be held accountable. In a lot of these situations, the people committing these horrendous acts of violence usually have some kind of a past. They have previous charges and they have records. To release these people back into society without having preventions for mental health, counseling, addictions, I think that's one way to rectify the situation and bring awareness and education to the situation, that we do need to work together collaboratively at all fronts, because you have a family doctor that sees you and your children. There could be signs of abuse. So to keep a record of that, there's the school system, there's the police system, there's the community system. So all of these things are interconnected. And I feel that we need to intervene and report things as we see it. It shouldn't just be left to the victim or the person that's living in these situations, because a lot of the times they have a hard time processing what's even taking place. So we need help in that aspect. We need to be able to create crisis interventions. In my incident, they could have easily asked me to step off to the side. And when this incident happened, it had to do with something that was related with domestic. I wasn't told to keep away from this individual. I wasn't told to keep my kids away from them. Maybe that would be seen as compromising the investigation. There was a history or a relationship there, and now they committed a crime against another woman. You would think this person can commit that against myself too. You don't even get that whole, we value your life and your safety. I think that is something that we be concerned with.
Just like you, when my daughter was going through the difficult relationship she was in, which was years and years, each time she left, I would always look for help, try to find organizations, try to see what agencies that could help, because I couldn't really speak to the situation publicly because my daughter was still here and I wanted to respect her privacy. But at the same time, I was trying to get help for her. So I came to the realization that there was really no help that could fit her needs. All the help available was help that couldn't really fit her particular needs, wasn't accounting for her. And then I realized after she's gone that it's up to me to create some kind of, at the very least, a way to start the discussion for women like myself, like my daughter, so we can talk about it. And I often say we have to realize there is no hero coming. Mm-hmm. We are our own heroes. We have to do what we need to do. It sounds to me that you reached that same conclusion, that when you had this situation and you not having the support or the time to look for support, because now all of a sudden you're injured, now all of a sudden you're dealing with Children's Aid Society, in that desperate realization that, like, I realized there is nobody else really doing what you needed to do. With all your pain, all your struggles, it's your job to tell us how you established the foundation and what do you hope that foundation accomplish, not only for you and your children, but other women that look like you or other mothers that look like me.
Absolutely. For me, the first thing I really just wanted was to be able to speak to someone that has experienced a mother who's experienced this no knock situation, the challenges that come with that, to for the police to come do what they did at my home and then take off without even saying, hey, here's a card, here's somebody that you can call and speak to if you have any questions regarding what happened here tonight, or you can come down our station and we can schedule an appointment. They didn't point me at any direction. So it was very dismissive. It felt very humiliating. I felt very violated. In a lot of ways, I even felt that feeling of disgust for myself, which was insane to feel, but I did. Having the entire neighborhood know what went down, I still have to live there. People might look at me strange. It just came with a lot of emotions. I thought about all the things that went wrong in that situation. A lot of the times, what I fell into was people assuming that you have help and resources or you have family. And a lot of the times, people are very much isolated, reflecting back on all the things that went wrong, advocacy for that, and no agency. Who could I call? Like right now, if I didn't have my neighbor, who was going to drive me to the hospital? Who was going to babysit my kids? Who was going to help me repair my house, willing to come sit with me at my home to meet children aid? I was looking for someone to stand with me in this situation and not just criminalize me. I felt that my small children and myself were very much criminalized. I felt like I was almost victim shamed. Just having people shun me out and talk to me that way didn't sit right with me. People telling me you live in Toronto housing, you're currently haven't lost a job or anything like that. Families that experience trauma and crises, they feel that they're left alone. And I wanted an organization that represented that we stand with you and we're here to help you. Foundation is creating new ideas and getting rid of the things that were not working and introducing new ways. And wellness, when we come from a background of trauma, I was a child who escaped civil war at 4 years old, came here at 6 years old. So there's that PTSD very much within me. And then this goes across to a lot of families that come from these type of situations. We stand with you. We support you. We support you through our mental health workshops that we have conducted and trauma intervention, crisis intervention programs that we have created, welcoming that we share our lived experiences. It is our narrative, and we have to be able to tell it. We are not statistics.
Thank you very much. I know this has not been easy to go back and relive some of those challenging situations, but I really appreciate you taking the time to speak to me today about your experience. And not only that, but standing up and deciding that you will do your part so you can help the next mother, next daughter, next sister, next woman facing a similar situation to what you had faced. Thank you very much. And thank you very much, our audience, for joining us. Today I have been joined by Asha Umar, a mother of two, survivor of No Knock Warrant, the founder of We Stand With You Foundation and Wellness. She joined me from Toronto, Ontario. Thank you, Asha, for joining me.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure. To everyone that was listening, please do keep an eye out and follow us on social platforms such as IG, Twitter, TikTok, and Facebook. It is WST. We Stand Together Foundation and Wellness.
Thank you, Asha. This has been another episode of Break the Silence, Build the Future. Please remember to listen, like, follow, and share. And join me next week for another episode of Break the Silence, Build the Future.